In 1866, the choir girls of Bell Hollow, Indiana, vanished after evening practice, every one of them, without a single trace. Newspapers at the time called it a summer fever of the imagination, but their families never accepted that explanation. More than 150 years later, researchers still whisper that what happened in that little church wasn't illness, but something far darker. June 3, 1866, Bell Hollow was the kind of town that could be missed if you blinked on a carriage ride through the valley. A small settlement with one general store, a single-room schoolhouse, a blacksmith's shed, and at its heart, a tall white church with a bell tower that had stood since 1839. Locals claimed the bell could be heard 6 miles across the cornfields, clear as a voice calling you home. It was the kind of town where life moved at the rhythm of farm work, Sunday sermons, and the laughter of children running down dirt lanes. Yet, even before the disappearance, something about Bell Hollow felt different, like a shadow lingering too long at the edges of lamplight. That summer, Reverend Jonathan Merrick, a stern man in his early 50s, organized a youth choir. The girls ranged in age from 10 to 16, daughters of farmers, millers, and teachers. They were known as the 12 Voices of Bell Hollow. Among them was Clara Benson, the miller's daughter, who had a voice that made grown men stop working their scythes to listen. There was Mary Ellen Hughes, only 12 but sharp-eyed and always scribbling verses in a notebook she hid under her apron. And there was Sarah Whitlock, the oldest at 16, whose father owned the general store and who often acted as the leader among the girls. Every Sunday evening, just before sunset, the girls gathered in the church to rehearse. They practiced hymns by lantern light, their voices carrying into the empty pews, mingling with the creak of wood and the restless sound of summer crickets outside. It was during those rehearsals that the first unease began. On June 10, 1866, the girls finished practice late. Mrs. Abigail Harper, the widow who kept the church clean, swore she saw shadows moving upstairs in the belfry after the girls had left. "I thought maybe one of them had snuck up there," she later told a county official. "But when I climbed the stairs, the hatch was bolted shut from the inside." A week later, several girls complained of hearing a second harmony behind their singing. "It sounded like someone older," Clara told her mother. "Like a woman's voice, only faint, like she was singing from under the floor." Her mother dismissed it as nerves. But by the third rehearsal, even Reverend Merrick admitted he heard an echo that did not belong. To the families, the choir was nothing but pride. Neighbors came to lean against the church fence, listening to the girls practice. On summer nights, the bell tower looked almost beautiful, glowing with lantern light against the indigo sky. But the girls themselves were uneasy. Sarah confided to her younger brother that she sometimes felt a cold hand brush her shoulder in the pew when no one stood behind her. Mary Ellen wrote a single, chilling line in her notebook, "It wants to be heard." June 24, 1866, by midsummer, Bell Hollow was preparing for the Independence Day celebration. The choir was expected to perform a new hymn on July 4th. That evening, June 24th, the girls rehearsed later than usual. Witnesses recalled the bell tolling just past 9, long after the sun had dipped below the cornfields. Several farmers walking home from the tavern swore they saw all 12 girls standing in the church doorway, staring out at the road, silent, their lanterns burning low. One man, Jacob Renshaw, later told a reporter in 1871, "They weren't moving. They weren't talking. Just staring, like they were waiting for something. I waved, but not one of them waved back. My wife says I dreamed it, but I know what I saw." July 1st, 1866, 1 week before the scheduled performance, the choir gathered as usual. The townspeople heard their voices rising over the fields, sweet, strong, and clear. Several described the hymn as otherworldly, as though more than 12 voices sang that night. Around 8:45 p.m., the singing stopped. A farmer named Daniel Clark, whose house sat across from the churchyard, reported hearing the bell strike 3 times, though no one had touched the rope. The church went dark. The next morning, the girls were gone. At first, it was assumed they had slipped out for mischief, wandering the fields or meeting friends. But by sunrise, every family in Bell Hollow was frantic. Horses were saddled. Lanterns swept the woods. The bell tower was searched from top to bottom. Inside the church, their hymnals were still open on the pews. One lantern lay tipped on its side, the wick burned out. On the pulpit rail, Someone had scratched words into the wood with a nail. "We are not 12." By July 3rd, the county sheriff arrived with a small team. They questioned Reverend Merrick, who insisted he had left the church around 8:30 p.m. and walked home. Mrs. Harper swore she had passed by at 8:50 and seen nothing but black windows. The sheriff's men combed the river, searched barns, and questioned strangers passing through town. Not a scrap of fabric, not a single footprint was ever found. The newspapers mocked Bell Hollow for hysteria. One headline in the Indianapolis Sentinel read, "Choir girls lost to summer whimsy," but the families were never convinced. Weeks later, Mary Ellen Hughes's notebook was discovered tucked beneath a church pew. Most of it was verses and simple rhymes. But the last page contained something else entirely. July 1st, 1866. "They said we must stay after." They said the song was not finished. "We do not want to go back in, but Sarah says it is safer if we obey. I hear it beneath us now humming. It knows our names." The official record closed the matter as a mass runaway or drowning, despite the absence of evidence. The church resumed services by August, though few sat near the front pews. But late that autumn, when the leaves had fallen and the fields lay bare, hunters passing the church swore they heard singing again. Not 12 voices, 13. July 4th, 1866, the 4th of July in Bell Hollow should have been a celebration. Flags were draped along the general store. The blacksmith had built a fire pit for roasting, and families prepared pies for the evening gathering. But the churchyard was silent. Instead of 12 girls leading the town in hymns, there were only 12 families standing side by side, waiting for answers that never came. A deputy nailed a notice on the church doors that morning. "The disappearance of the Bell Hollow Choir remains under investigation. Reward of $100 for any credible information." $100 was no small amount. Still, no one came forward. By July 10th, rumors swirled like summer dust. Some said the girls had run away together, perhaps joining a traveling show in Indianapolis. Others claimed the river had taken them, though no bodies were found downstream. At the general store, old Mr. Whitlock muttered, "You don't just lose 12 children without something keeping them." By August, families stopped coming into town as often. Mothers clutched younger children tighter. Fathers watched the woods with rifles at night. The choir girls had become both tragedy and taboo. Attention soon turned to Reverend Jonathan Merrick. As the last adult to see the girls, many believed he knew more than he admitted. On August 2nd, Sheriff Edward Cross recorded an interview. "Sheriff Cross, you say you left the church at 8:30 that evening?" Reverend Merrick, "Yes, sir. I locked the front door myself." Sheriff Cross, "And yet 12 children remained inside?" Reverend Merrick, "I believe them to have left with Mrs. Harper." Sheriff Cross, "Mrs. Harper swears she was not there." Reverend Merrick, pause. Then I do not know where they went." The sheriff noted the Reverend's visible shaking during questioning. Weeks later, parishioners began to leave his services. Some whispered the Reverend had made a bargain with the thing in the belfry. Even as suspicion grew, the strangest part was how the church itself changed. On August 18th, 1866, a farmer named Elijah Moore reported seeing lamplight glowing in the windows long past midnight. When he approached, he claimed he heard voices inside, soft, lilting, unmistakably feminine. But when he pushed the doors open, the church was empty. Only hymnals lay scattered across the floor, all open to the same page, Hymn 46, "Come, Holy Spirit." The next morning, the bell rang out 6 times on its own. No one was inside the tower. Mrs. Abigail Harper, the church caretaker, kept to herself after the disappearance. But in September, she broke her silence to a local reporter. "They are still there," she insisted. "The girls. I hear them in the pews when I sweep, their feet tapping on the wood, their whispers behind me. Once I turned too fast and saw Clara in the back row, her hair loose, smiling as though nothing had happened. But when I blinked, she was gone." The article was dismissed as hysteria. But neighbors noticed Mrs. Harper aged 10 years in that season alone. Among the 12, Mary Ellen Hughes's disappearance cut deepest. Her father, Samuel Hughes, searched the woods nightly. He carried his daughter's notebook wherever he went, folded to the last entry, "It knows our names." In late September, Samuel burst into the sheriff's office. His hands shook as he placed the notebook on the desk. "She's writing still," he whispered. I found new pages. The sheriff read them. The handwriting matched Mary Ellen's, but the ink was fresh. The new line said, "We are beneath the floor." The song keeps us going. The sheriff filed no official report. By October, the families of Bell Hollow stopped attending the church entirely. Sunday sermons were moved to a barn on the outskirts of town. The bell tower loomed over an empty square, its white paint peeling in the autumn rain, but no one dared take the building down. They thought if they tore it apart, whatever was inside might come out, one historian explained in 1932. Instead, the church stood untouched like a sealed tomb. On November 11, 1866, a group of boys dared each other to sleep inside the church. Only one returned. 13-year-old Thomas Renshaw ran home at dawn, his clothes soaked and face white as chalk. "They were singing," he stammered to his father. "All of them. I heard them under the floor." Then something pulled at my boots. When neighbors investigated, they found deep scratches along the wooden planks near the altar, as if fingernails had scraped upward. Thomas never spoke of it again. He left Bell Hollow at 17 and never returned. By Christmas, Bell Hollow had become a ghost of itself. Families hung wreaths on their doors but kept lanterns burning through the night. Afraid of the dark silence, some swore they still saw the girls at a distance, walking across fields, standing by the riverbank, or peering from the church windows. Always 12. Never speaking. One farmer, Henry Calloway, confessed on his deathbed in 1902. "I saw them on Christmas Eve. They were singing by the bell tower, dressed in white. The snow did not touch their shoulders. I prayed to look away, but when I did, the hymn followed me home." The final entry in Sheriff Cross's file, dated December 30, 1866, reads, "Search efforts concluded. No trace of the missing choir girls. Families remain in mourning. The church stands locked until further notice. This case is hereby closed, though it offers no conclusion." But one page later, in handwriting not matching the sheriff's, a single line was scrawled, "They are not gone." In the years that followed, the disappearance of the Bell Hollow Choir became nothing more than a whispered legend in Indiana. But in January of 1867, when heavy snow melted into the church basement, workers digging drainage claimed they found something pressed into the soil. Not bones, a hymnal. Its pages were wet, but the ink was fresh. And on the last page, in 12 different handwritings, was written the same chilling phrase, "Sing with us." March 1867, the winter thaw left the town drenched in mud and silence. By March, Bell Hollow's population had shrunk by nearly a third. Families of the missing girls packed wagons and left, unable to pass the church without breaking down. But not everyone abandoned the mystery. Some, like Samuel Hughes, refused to leave. "I will not leave while her voice is still here," he told a county official. It was during this spring that the story took its darkest turn. On March 19, 1867, two workmen, Andrew Keller and Elias Boone, were hired to repair the church's drainage. While digging in the basement, Keller's spade struck something hollow. Beneath the soil lay rotting wooden boards, arranged like a sealed trapdoor. When they pried it open, they found a crawl space filled with stale air. Inside, stacked along the earthen walls, were 12 small shoes. Each shoe was muddy, but none showed signs of decay. The sheriff confiscated them immediately. The families recognized them. "They belonged to our girls," Mrs. Benson sobbed. Each one. The church basement was sealed again. Reverend Merrick's behavior worsened. He stopped preaching altogether and was often seen wandering the cemetery at night, muttering psalms under his breath. On April 2, 1867, he appeared at Hughes's home pale and trembling. "It is not them," he whispered. "It wears their voices. You must not answer when it calls." When asked what he meant, Merrick only shook his head. He left Bell Hollow days later, never to return. In May, Samuel Hughes claimed he found another page from Mary Ellen's notebook, wedged beneath a pew leg. Though the church had been locked for months, it read, "The floor is thinner here. They knock from below. Sometimes I think it is us, but Sarah says it is older than us. It waits for the hymn to finish." Scholars later authenticated the paper as genuine 1860s stock, but no one could explain how fresh ink appeared decades later. The bell had not rung since the night of the disappearance. Yet on June 21, 1867, as a storm swept through, it tolled 13 times. Several witnesses swore they saw lanterns swinging in the tower windows. One farmer described seeing all 12 girls, standing shoulder to shoulder, holding hands. But behind them stood a 13th, taller, with a face I could not see. When the storm passed, the tower was empty. That summer, County Clerk Benjamin Lowe uncovered documents in the courthouse archives. Among property deeds and baptism records, he found letters dating back to 1839, the year the church was built. One letter, written by the original carpenter, was addressed to his wife. "They have asked me to build the floor stronger for what lies below. I hear the chanting even when the men are gone. Do not let the children sing there after dark." Lowe turned the papers over to the sheriff. Days later, he left town. By autumn, Bell Hollow had nearly emptied. Travelers avoided the place. But on September 14, 1867, a wandering preacher stopped in town. He introduced himself only as Brother Amos. He warned the remaining townsfolk, "Do not believe the girls are gone. You see, Bell Hollow was founded on a lie. That church was never meant for worship. It was built to keep something bound. When the children sang, they did not vanish. They fed it. He was chased out by angry fathers, but his words lingered. That November, Samuel Hughes returned to the church one final time. Neighbors saw him carry a lantern inside at dusk. They heard him shouting his daughter's name over and over. Then, silence. At midnight, the bell struck once. In the morning, the church was empty. Samuel was never seen again. His lantern was later found at the altar, still lit. 5 years later, in a rare interview, Elijah Moore, the farmer who once heard the phantom singing, spoke with the Indianapolis Gazette. His words, preserved in faded newsprint, still disturb researchers today. They never left. I hear them still, every harvest season. The song is sweeter now, but if you listen too long, you'll hear the 13th voice, deep and hollow, like it comes from the ground itself. That is when you must stop listening, for it will notice you. By the winter of 1867, Bell Hollow had become nearly abandoned. Only a handful of families remained, and then, on Christmas Eve, the bell rang again. Travelers passing on the road reported hearing a full choir singing Silent Night in perfect harmony. But the chilling part wasn't the melody. Witnesses swore that halfway through the hymn the voices stopped, one by one, until only one voice remained, low, ancient, and dragging the words out like a curse. Sleep in heavenly peace. Hollow, Indiana. January 1868, the new year brought heavy snow, muffling the little town into silence. Barely 30 people still lived in Bell Hollow, their houses scattered like forgotten outposts across the frozen fields. Most avoided the church entirely. But the sound carried, even with doors barred and curtains drawn. Families reported hearing hymns at night, notes drifting across the snow, as if sung through glass. One farmer's wife, Hannah Calloway, described it in her journal. It starts softly, like children humming. Then the voices multiply, louder, until it feels as though the house itself is vibrating. But the strangest part is the pauses. The silences between verses are not empty. They are listening silences, as if waiting for us to answer back. The few who stayed were divided. Some wanted to burn the church down. Others argued destroying it would unleash whatever lingered inside. At a town gathering in February, the debate turned violent. "You think it's holy ground?" one man shouted. "It's a trap, a prison, and our daughters are inside it." An older widow countered, "They are gone, not prisoners. What sings in there is not them, and fire will not kill it." The meeting ended with nothing decided. Fear had rooted too deep. On March 3, 1868, travelers reported seeing lights in the belfry as they passed on horseback. They described 12 lanterns swaying, though the tower had been locked for nearly 2 years. More disturbing, one traveler swore a girl waved at him from the window. When he slowed his horse, the face changed. It was not a child, he later told a county clerk. It was stretched, as though the skin was too thin for the skull. And it grinned at me. Abigail Harper, the widow and church caretaker, had left town after the disappearance. But in April of 1868, she returned. She claimed she had been called back. Neighbors saw her dragging sacks of coal into the church basement at night. Smoke rose from the chimney long after midnight. When confronted, she replied only, "They must be kept warm." By May, she had stopped leaving the church entirely. In June, the county dispatched Dr. Isaac Wren, a physician with an interest in nervous disorders, to examine Abigail. His notes survive. Subject speaks as though in plural, referring to herself as we. When asked who resides with her, she listed all 12 choir girls by name. The voice often deepens unnaturally mid-sentence. Skin is cold to the touch despite warm air. Strong resistance to leaving the church. Wren requested Abigail be removed for treatment, but before the sheriff could act, she vanished. The only trace left was a trail of ash from the altar to the basement trapdoor. That summer, strange phenomena spread to the homes of the few children left in Bell Hollow. Parents reported their sons and daughters waking at night, walking toward the church in trances. One mother described her 10-year-old standing barefoot in the field, whispering, "They need more voices." Another boy was found, scratching musical notes into the wall of his bedroom with his fingernails until they bled. By August 1868, fear overcame hesitation. A group of men, led by Thomas Renshaw's father, broke into the church with axes and kerosene. They smashed pews, shattered windows, and set fire to the altar. But the flames did not spread. Witnesses swore the wood refused to burn. Smoke rose only in thin black threads that curled into words. "Sing with us." One man dropped dead where he stood. No cause was found. The rest fled, leaving the church eerily untouched, as though mocking their effort. On September 9, 1868, at exactly midnight, the bell tolled 13 times again. But this time, the sound carried miles beyond Bell Hollow. Families in neighboring towns claimed they woke in terror to the same hollow ringing. Worse still, children across the county reported hearing a hymn in their dreams that night. Some even woke up singing in perfect harmony, though they had never learned the hymn. The county declared Bell Hollow unfit for habitation by winter. Many abandoned their farms, moving east. In 1870, a letter arrived at the Indiana Synod, signed in the trembling hand of Jonathan Merrick. The vanished reverend, it read, "You must never reopen that place. What took them is older than the church, older than Bell Hollow. It was never meant to be sung to, but bound in silence. The mistake was giving it voices. I hear them still, even in my exile. They beg, but they are not my girls. I know the 13th voice now. It is not of this world, and it waits." No one ever located Merrick again. October 31st, 1870, Bell Hollow's last families recalled it as the worst night of their lives. On Halloween, the bell began to toll just before midnight. This time, it did not stop. The ringing lasted nearly an hour, shaking windows and rattling dishes from cupboards. Over the sound came the unmistakable choir, 12 voices rising in perfect pitch. But then the 13th voice joined. It roared, low and cavernous, so loud it cracked the bell tower window. And with that note, the 12 voices screamed. The sound carried until sunrise. By then, several families had fled town, never to return. When investigators from Indianapolis arrived weeks later, they found the church eerily calm. The bell cracked down its side. The pews were dusted in ash. But the strangest discovery was in the basement, carved deep into the stone walls, in 12 desperate hands, were words no one wished to read aloud. "We did not choose this song." And below that, carved larger, heavier, as though gouged by claws, "The choir is not yet complete." When the last families abandoned Bell Hollow in 1870, silence fell over the town. Fields went wild. Houses collapsed beneath snow and rot. Yet the church remained, untouched, watching. Those who passed on the road said it seemed to lean toward them as though listening. Others swore they saw faint figures in the belfry window, girls swaying in unison as though still at choir practice. Most riders urged their horses faster, but not all. In 1873, a small group of theological students from Indianapolis University came to Bell Hollow. They'd read of the disappearance of the choir girls and wanted to prove its superstition. Their leader, Thomas Ellery, kept detailed notes. The church itself is in disrepair, yet the air inside is warmer than without. No dust, no cobwebs, as though maintained by invisible hands. At dusk, faint music is heard, though no one sings. Strangest of all, the pulpit Bible remains open, though no wind stirs the pages. It rests always upon the same verse, Psalm 22, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" The students camped in the nave. That night they recorded hearing 12 distinct voices. But when Ellery reviewed his journal by lantern light, he noticed something chilling. 13 names had been scribbled across the margin, none by his hand. On their third night, the group attempted a hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." Halfway through the second verse, their voices faltered. Something else had joined in. It was not human, Ellery wrote. It came from beneath the floor, so loud, so deep that my ribs ached with every note. And the girls' voices changed then, no longer sweet, but shrieking, though still in tune. My companions fled. I could not. The song pinned me where I stood. When dawn came, Ellery was alone. His classmates were gone, vanished like the choir before them. He never left Bell Hollow. His skeleton was found decades later, seated in the front pew, head bowed as if in prayer. By 1880, Bell Hollow was known as cursed. Stories spread through taverns and church pulpits. Some said the 13th voice was not a ghost, but an ancient thing that the church had been built over, a pagan altar, buried long before Indiana was settled. Others believed it was the devil himself, mocking the faithful by twisting hymns into cries of torment. But among the few who had dared to enter and lived, all accounts agreed on one detail. The 13th voice was not merely a sound. It was hunger. It wanted more. One of the rare official records came in 1884 from Sheriff James Dodd of Knox County, tasked with ensuring no squatters lived in Bell Hollow. He and 2 deputies entered the church. Dodd's report, preserved in county archives, reads, "We found the pews in order, though no one has attended service in decades. The floorboards trembled as though heavy wagons passed nearby, though the night was still. At midnight the bell rang, though cracked, and we heard music below our feet. I ordered the trapdoor opened. The deputies refused. I forced it. I will never forget what I saw. 12 small forms, kneeling in a circle, their faces pale and eyeless. And in the center, something rising tall as the rafters, its mouth too wide, its voice a cavern. We fled, and 1 deputy did not make it to the door. He was not taken screaming, but singing. Sheriff Dodd resigned the next day. He never returned to law enforcement. By the turn of the 20th century, Bell Hollow had vanished from most maps. Only wanderers and drifters knew of the ruins. Still, each generation had its witnesses. Hunters lost their dogs to the church. Lovers dared each other to spend the night and returned gray-haired by morning. Children in nearby towns woke from dreams of hymns they'd never learned. In 1922, a fire broke out in the woods nearby, burning acres of farmland. Strangely, the flames curved around the church, leaving it untouched amid the blackened earth. It stood, black bell cracked, doors locked, waiting. One final testimony came in 1931 from a man named Aaron Briggs, who had entered as a boy with friends. He was the only one who survived. Interviewed on his deathbed, he whispered, "We thought it was a lark." We lit candles, dared each other to sing. When we reached the last verse, there was a pause, and then it joined. The 13th. It wasn't just sound, it filled us, pressed inside. I saw my friends smile as their throats bled from singing too hard. They didn't stop. They couldn't. I ran. I still hear them, every night for 60 years. I will hear them until I join. He died minutes later, his lips moving in silent prayer, or song. By the 1950s, urban legends about Bell Hollow spread into Indiana classrooms and church sermons. Teenagers dared each other to drive past. Some swore they saw the belfry lit at midnight. Others claimed the choir's song could be faintly heard on nights when the wind was still. But those who lingered always said the same thing. The 13th voice was getting louder. In 1974, Dr. Helen Grant, an archaeologist researching vanished towns, spent 2 nights in Bell Hollow. Her journal entries, later recovered from her car, remain the most chilling. The church is not abandoned, it breathes. Walls contract in the dark as though inhaling. My recorder captured 13 tracks of singing, though I sang alone. When I played it back, the girls' voices were joined by another. A roar beneath the music. It shook the glass. Her final entry, "I have found the 13th. It is not beneath us, it is above, around, within. It does not want to be worshipped. It wants to be repeated. We are not listening to it. It is listening through us." Dr. Grant disappeared the next night. Her car remained by the roadside, headlights still on. By the 1980s, the church was considered off-limits, patrolled by local sheriffs who warned thrill-seekers away. But on Christmas Eve 1987, residents of 3 neighboring counties reported the same impossible event. The cracked bell of Bell Hollow rang again. Not 13 times, but 12. And then silence. For the first time in over a century, the 13th voice did not sing. Instead, it waited. The next day, when a group of teenagers broke in, they found something carved freshly into the altar wood. The next voice will be yours. More than 150 years have passed since the choir girls of Bell Hollow vanished in 1866. The town itself has long since dissolved into overgrowth, its name erased from official maps. But the church remains. Its steeple still cuts the horizon, warped and leaning, yet impossible to collapse. Hunters say even storms curve around it. Farmers swear the soil near it grows nothing but weeds. And still, on winter nights, voices rise, few. Descendants of Bell Hollow remain alive today. Most refuse interviews. A handful have spoken, their voices trembling, insisting that the story is true. One, Ruth Merrick, great-granddaughter of the Reverend, spoke to an Indiana radio station in 1999. My family never stopped running. Every town we moved to, the voices followed. At first faint, then louder. I grew up falling asleep to hymns no one sang. When I tried to ignore it, I'd dream of the church pulling me back. That place is a magnet, it wants us all there. Why would I invent something so horrible? Ruth never gave another interview. She died in 2001. Neighbors reported hearing faint singing during her burial service, though no choir had been arranged. In 2005, an independent film crew entered Bell Hollow for a short documentary. They planned a Halloween release, dismissing the stories as local myth. The raw footage, later confiscated, is whispered about but never shown publicly. One cameraman, who later fled Indiana, described it anonymously. The first night, the bell rang once. Just once. Our microphones picked up what sounded like children giggling. Then, during playback, there were 13 voices on the tape, layered, echoing, surrounding us. You don't understand. They weren't singing a hymn. They were singing our names. The documentary was never released. The production company folded months later, in 2014. Historian Dr. Margaret Phelps published a paper on the choir phenomenon of Bell Hollow. Her research traced the legend back before the founding of the church. She uncovered land records proving the site was once a burial mound. Dismantled in the 1830s, her conclusion was stark. The church was not built to honor God, but to contain something older, an echo that demanded living voices to sustain it. The choir girls were not taken randomly. They were a tithe. Dr. Phelps vanished during a lecture tour in Kentucky. Her hotel room was found empty, her notes scattered, with a single line scrawled on the wall. Do not let it hear you hum. Residents across Indiana still report incidents. In 2019, 3 hikers recorded faint singing near the Bell Hollow ruins. When played back, a 4th voice joined, deep, dragging, unmistakably male. In 2021, a farmer in Boone County reported his daughter waking at night to sing Latin hymns she had never been taught. When asked why, she replied, "They asked me to help finish the song." Perhaps the most chilling testimony comes from a man known only as Daniel, who spoke in a podcast interview in October 2023. His parents had dared to enter the church when he was a child. He claimed something followed them home. My mother hummed hymns in her sleep every night after that. My father stopped speaking altogether. One Christmas Eve, the bell rang even though we were 2 counties away. I looked out the window, and in the reflection, I saw 12 girls standing behind me. Their mouths open but no sound. Then behind them I saw the 13th, taller. Its mouth stretched wide, and I swear I felt my own lungs empty. I don't tell people this to scare them. I tell them because it's real. And because it's still waiting. The podcast episode was pulled after only 2 days online. The host never explained why. Today no one lives within 5 miles of Bell Hollow. The church stands locked, its bell silent. Officials call it structurally unsound. Locals call it the throat of the hollow. And yet, every Christmas Eve, travelers on the highway report the same thing, faint music carried on the wind. 12 sweet voices, and then a pause. Then the 13th voice, low, cavernous, impossibly close, finishing the hymn. Those who linger say they feel it listening, choosing, waiting for a new voice to join. This case has never been solved. The 12 choir girls of Bell Hollow were never found. Families never received closure. And yet, more than a century and a half later, people across Indiana still whisper about the 13th voice. Skeptics dismiss it. Believers swear it's real. But one question remains, carried through time like an unfinished song. If the 13th voice is still waiting, whose voice will it claim next? The end.